The traditional purpose of compression is to control, reduce, dynamic range. It originated to squeeze the wide dynamic range of music into the narrower available range of older analog media. But people quickly realized that compression offers the ability to not just manage dynamics, but also to impart a distinct characteristic to an audio signal. Good compressors, properly used, can add a desirable sense of thickness to some instruments, or tighten up the sound of others. This occurs, in part, because of a compressor's ability to manipulate the volume envelopes of notes, thanks to the attack and release controls. I briefly went over what attack and release controls do in the first clip. They offer user control over the compressor's response times whenever the signal crosses above or drops back below threshold. Some vintage compressors manage this automatically, but most offer manual control to allow users to avoid any unwanted compression artifacts like pumping. But besides just serving that technical function, these controls can be employed for creative purposes as well, to deliberately reshape the envelopes of notes, which can quite noticeably change an instrument's character. The most classic example of this is the way a compressor's attack and release controls can be used to either tighten up or fatten up the sound of the drums. Again, some compressors are specifically known for this, but almost any compressor can be used this way. This particular creative application is achieved by setting attack and release to either faster or slower settings. You could compress either the kit as a whole or individual drums. Here I'm applying compression to the kick and snare. If you set attack and release to slower settings, around 10 to 20 milliseconds or so for attack, and around 500 milliseconds or higher for release, this will tighten up drum notes. When each note's attack crosses the threshold, the slower attack setting will let the initial transient impact through uncompressed before the compressor kicks in, but it'll then clamp down on the decay or ring of each note. The slower release will keep that ring down until the next note begins. So each note will have this enhanced impact and then a much shorter decay, kind of like adding damping to the drums after the fact. A slight change in settings can do just the opposite. Fast attack and release settings will enhance the decay for a boomier, fatter drum sound. A very fast attack setting, up to around 1 or 2 milliseconds, will immediately clamp down on the transient impact, but then a fast release, up to around 40 or 50 milliseconds or so, will allow the decay, the ring, to quickly come back up. When you compensate with makeup gain, you'll have a softer transient followed by a comparatively louder ring or boom, making even a fairly tight-sounding drum kit much bigger and fatter, like removing the damping after the fact. This is just one example of the creative use of compression as an effect, but that's often the reason so much compression is applied in modern mixes. It's not just all about dynamic control. Many of those compressors are there to shape the elements in the mix, and this kind of usage is a big part of the characteristic sound of today's recordings.